with that out of the way, let's get down to business. Since introducing their M365 licensing packages, Microsoft has definitely added a lot of value with more than 20 apps and with over 1,400 new features and enhancements. So please sit back, relax, and let's hear our President and CEO, Matt Katzer, give us an update on what's new in Office 365. Please take it away, Matt. You're on mute, Matt.
You know, first time in 2022, I got the, hey, you're on mute. So anyway, welcome everyone and welcome to 2022 and thanks Mike for the introduction. Yeah, there's a lot of changes that are happening and everything else. And so what we did is I put together all the information changes that's going on. I'm also going to have Wayne Reiner, one of our Azure experts on. I was going to talk about some of the changes with Power Apps and what's going on at Azure Virtual Desktop so you can see the pieces. So you understand what's going on. There's a lot of changes. It's like Microsoft is on overdrive with everything that's going on in terms of the economy and the world in general. It's very fascinating. You know, for KAMIND, the biggest issue when we look at various things, we're basically one of the few of the managed partners with Microsoft. There's only a couple hundred managed partners that basically are directly managed by Microsoft. And also we made the third year running for the Inc. 5000 last year. And it looks like we're going to be doing the same thing for this year. And we're involved a lot with the defense industrial base on the security subscription. We do a lot with Microsoft Security Stack. But with that, enough about that, some about us. And what I really wanted to talk to you today is really about what's happening. And we're going to go over license changes, a new edition of the 365, some of the things that we have with Teams. And, you know, as we go in recording this message, one of the new features that they have is transcription. So you can actually have a Teams meeting and have all the conversation transcribed. And if you have actually foreign guests or different languages, you can actually basically, you get the transcription in English, your native language. And then go over some of the other changes that we actually see, plus some new product announcements. And of course, about the price changes and get ready for those things. With KAMIND, you know, basically our goal is we exist to prevent and solve big problems. So when we actually do things at KAMIND, we look at terms of how do we actually handle these things and how do we actually really address stuff from a long-term basis. And when you look at 365, it's really interesting on how the Microsoft views 365. Our version of the cloud, when I wrote my first 365 book, and we sold over 280,000 of those books, it basically, this was the days of BPOS. And those that know that the cloud, when Microsoft did the first cloud, that was called the Business Productivity Online Services, a really fancy name that they had it. And when you actually look at the history that's going on and what's happened over the years, you know, so we basically were a Microsoft Cloud Accelerate partner in terms of helping customers get on 365. And we did a lot of large companies at that time and a lot of mergers and acquisitions. But a lot of things have happened. And I thought this was good to pull some of these slides so you can see just what the enhancements was. As you started from 2011, as you go into we're today at 2021, as we get in 2022. I mean, it's really fascinating when you look at it, and there really hasn't been a price increase across the board. But, you know, like anything else, you know, prices are going up, and they're seeing some changes. Now, as Microsoft said, as Mike said, you know, there's been a lot of changes in terms of capabilities, new apps that have been put in place, in terms of the capability of OneDrive, and some of those remember the OneDrive way back when was first announced. It was really interesting and how the OneDrive has got the point that it's sustainable and across, and it's a core backup tool that when you actually have a Windows 10 device that's integrated, OneDrive is totally integrated in the system, so you literally don't need to back up anything on your system because your OneDrive takes care of it for you. Now, the other big change when you look at some of the changes on the history, it's going to be the big change I think is for all of us is audio conferencing. Audio conferencing is going mainstream in all the applications. So come on March 1st, what you're going to see, it doesn't matter if you're doing Office 365, E3 or E1, you're doing the frontline subscription F3 and F1, and also the Business Basic and the Business Premium. you're going to have Teams dial-in calling at no additional charge. And I think that's kind of a fantastic add-on. Now, also with this is there are going to be some price increases. And we're going to see price increases across the subscriptions. And they're also, Microsoft is doing effective on March 1st. And some of these subscriptions are already, and what we're working with all our clients getting new CSP agreements in place, is Microsoft is going to be increasing, they're changing the subscription to 3 types: a monthly subscription, a yearly, and a triannular or 3-year subscription. And they're making some other changes we'll get in later, but the big change you have to realize is that CSP, or what we call legacy CSP that you have now, those prices are going to go up 20%. And they're going to come down to a month, and they're getting rid of the basically the ability to delete license in between a subscription term. That's why we have a monthly, yearly, and triannual, and I'll talk more about this later. But kind of the big change that you see on the impact and the price list is basically you're going to see audio conferencing as it gets rolled out into the mainstream. And it doesn't matter if you have 365, and what we're doing is that we are going through a lot of subscriptions as we see folks that have paid audio conferencing as we get through in terms of their February invoices, for instance, we're converting those into the free subscriptions. And so we're getting ready for this whole migration that we'll see happen. Now, price-wise, there's some prices, and there's always good news and bad news with the features. You know, and this is kind of, they announced this, but basically the 365 E3, for instance, going up $4 to $36. The Office E3 is going the $20 to $23. If you're on the small business versions, the Business Basic from $5 to $6, and the Business Premium to $22. Now, what's also happening is that this is affecting right now just corporate and government. There is going to be some changes on education and charity, but those haven't been announced. We expect those to be announced probably sometime in April. But the monthly increase, what they're happening with Microsoft, they're basically terminating the legacy CSP program, and they're structuring from a standpoint to basically say, okay, let's get through the as you go through in legacy CSP, as those subscriptions expire or they come up for renewal, or you make any changes to them, they will automatically convert to a month-to-month subscription. So those are some of the things happen. And if you don't watch what's happened with your subscription and work with us, you can see your prices go up 20 to 31% on those subscriptions. So it's really kind of critical that you basically really look on the pieces and everything else. Now, the other change that we're going to see in terms of updates, and what I've decided to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes in Teams, for instance, and then I'm going to pass it over to Wayne that he can talk more about Power Automate. Now, there's been a lot of changes in terms of Teams, in terms of capability and the flexibility. They're basically doing more integration. They're basically building the files so you can actually co-author things easier and you can share things easily with the whole team. And along with this, in terms of why you see some of the changes, you're also seeing basically how the organization's changing as well. So you're seeing a different look in terms of the team, so how you actually organize things and try to keep things in sync. Now, one of the things that we're also seeing with Teams as well, and we'll see this in terms of what we have here in terms of Office 365, and you look at PowerPoint, for instance, how we actually do live captions and subtitles, how we collaborate things on worksheets. And also the speech to text. Now, the speech to text been around for a while. What's really fascinating, what's happening with speech to text, is we're actually adding transcription into a Teams meeting. So you can actually have a Teams meeting with your peers and basically enable transcription so you don't record the video call, because sometimes, people record calls, but unless you index them, you really don't use it. But what happens a lot of times when you actually do transcribing a call, now you have a documented text in terms of what the various Teams members are saying. So you can actually go back and verify. So if you're actually, like our program manager, for instance, that basically runs a lot of our projects, she uses transcription to basically go through to make sure she got the action items in place. and basically make sure she's holding us as well as our clients accountable when we do project to make sure we hit the schedule. So there's a lot of interesting features that you see that just makes it kind of different to how we want to change. And when you look in terms of how that happens and, in terms of meetings and everything else, we're seeing changes and make it easier to add like code on the fly and add different types of low-code solutions. And what a low-code solution is, that's really something you don't need a developer to do. It's something that anyone can actually do to basically go generate it. And what you're seeing is through the screen is basically how texts are going. We use a feature in Teams called Viva, for instance, so we can give accolades to members of the teams and basically give sports. Because as you work in terms of distributed environment, and even an office environment, it's nice to give the kudos to folks to make sure they're doing the right things. Now, one of the things we do with all our Office 365 subscriptions is we decided to basically integrate a learning management system that's basically free. So if you have a CSP agreement with KAMIND and we're your licensed partner, we will actually give you a training system so you can actually help and basically, educate your team. Now, what's nice about this, how we actually use it, so when we actually get calls from our help desk, we actually will pull links out of this, send you the links necessary to address kind of the issues that you actually have. So we're trying to basically work with our clients to help do two things: improve the experience, lower the cost of support in general, because support not only affects our clients, but it also affects all of us. And our goal is to try to make sure the experience is better. And it's all about our experience of our end users that we support. Now, with the other big change, and I'm going to pass it over to Wayne, is going to be Power Automate. So I'll let Wayne go share his screen, and I'll break mine for a second. And Wayne, you can pick it up and continue on with give us a Power Automate and Azure Virtual Desktop overview.
I was there, sorry. I am going to... Thanks, Matt. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to be presenting some really cool technology that Microsoft is offering. I'll be presenting Microsoft's Power Automate application, Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, and a product that KAMIND is offering called in the Cloud. As I go through this technology, what you hear is an underlying theme that Microsoft is putting forward, and that is to empower your team.
Wayne, we're having a hard time. Can you move your mic in front of your...
I'm sorry. Can you hear me better? As I go through this technology, can you hear me okay now? Okay. What you hear is an underlying theme of Microsoft enabling your workforce and reducing barriers, regardless of where they are. So the new technology will simplify provisioning and revocation of resources. So if you have people that you need to provide resources for, you can easily provision them, and when the time comes, you can take that provisioning away. So about Power Automate. Power Automate is quick, simple, and free. There's no programming involved. Essentially, it's a menu-driven, what they used to call WYSIWYG, or you can drag stuff to where you need it, and it's easy for you to put things in a workflow that makes sense for your organization. And one of the best parts is it's free. You can actually, if you have a Windows 10 license, you can download the Power Automate desktop version and create some flows for your local workflows on your desktop. So, like I said, it's a very simple process to create Power Automate workflows. Essentially, what you need is a trigger. As an example, Matt was discussing earlier giving your teammates kudos. So in this example I have on the screen, if you have a trigger, let's say a web survey, and somebody really wants to give somebody kudos on your team, you can create a Power Automate to grab that information and actually create for example, a Teams message to that team and provide the kudos that way, to where you can congratulate somebody who possibly did a good job in a programmer and so forth. So the Power Automate essentially brings everything together. It goes outside of Microsoft and brings in applications that you typically use within your office space. You have all types of connectors that are available with Power Automate that you can use. And the one thing about Microsoft is they really make it a point to help you come up with some good ideas. So what I wanted to do really quickly is show you what we have here out on the site. And they literally ask you, what do you want to automate? And you can go through the templates they have here. And as you can see here, they have some very basic ideas you can use that are tailored to specific areas of business. So if you're not sure how to use Power Automate, don't worry. Microsoft has hundreds of ideas, and all of these will walk you through the process of actually doing the connection. As you can see here, that it's going to actually ask me to authenticate on these two and then create the connection for me. So it's a very simple process, and you also have many training resources on the Power Automate website that will help you with your development skills. Next, I want to present Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, this isn't something new, but it's a very, very good technology to have in your environment as far as the convenience and the efficiency of delivering desktops to end users. You are actually able to deliver a desktop through a web browser to people, regardless of their location or almost regardless of the platform they're on. So you can actually pull up a Windows desktop on a HTML5 browser, an Apple, an iMac, an Android device, or of course a Windows device. Any one of these devices can be used to pull up your Windows Virtual Desktop or your Azure Virtual Desktop. I have the screen up here because one thing I want to make very clear is over to the far left represents the clients accessing your virtual desktop environment. In the middle, as you can see there, that's actually managed by Microsoft. So all of your landing page and load balancing and performance and maintenance to connect to your Azure Virtual Desktop environment is controlled by Microsoft. So they'll make sure that landing page is always available to connect to your environment. Over to the far right, you can see the area that represents your actual environment that you own and control. Those are all actual Azure components. As I was discussing here, this is actually the area that Microsoft manages for you, so that you can make sure that your environment is always available. The Azure Virtual Desktop delivers a full Windows 10 or 11 experience. Windows 11 is available in the Azure Virtual Desktop environment now. We call it AVD, so I'll shorten it to AVD. AVD will deliver to your machine all the apps and content, and as you can see here, the storage and everything that represents your personal Windows experience will be delivered and presented to you within your virtual desktop, and of course delivered through a browser. Some of the key features of the virtual desktop is when accessed through a browser, you can literally be anywhere to access your virtual desktop. So your virtual desktop might contain, or will most likely contain, company sensitive data. And even though you are accessing it from different locations, as the pictures kind of present here, from let's say an airport or a foreign country, or even if you need to provision a desktop to a contractor in in a different state or a different country, you can do that, and the data that is within that virtual desktop is completely firewalled and containerized from the machine, the physical machine that is used to connect to it. So again, a kiosk in an airport, you need to get internet access and access something from work. You can do that without without actually having any issues with the security or the integrity of your data. So one thing we again put together at KAMIND, which is going to be extremely beneficial to companies, is the secure deployment of QuickBooks in the Azure cloud. So what we are putting together is the ability for you to, as its name implies, get access to your QuickBooks database through the web after safe or after multi-factor authentication, and your access is the performance is that of the AVD, so you'll get the maximized performance, the maximized bandwidth, and you can make sure that when you access that QuickBooks data, that it's safe from any type of problems, any type of exposure. Of course, because it's Azure, you also get the like as I mentioned before, the multi-factor authentication, and of course the encryption. So when your QuickBooks is on the server and waiting for you access, it's actually, the data is there and it's encrypted. And then, as Matt mentioned earlier, we have backups and disaster recovery. So if you need to roll back to another day, or you have errors that you need to recover from, you can use your backups. And of course, disaster recovery, which is much different. That's if you have a problem in your office, or an outage or a flood, you can go somewhere else and pick up right where you left off. And that's obviously one of the key features of this type of configuration, is it's always accessible. The Azure controlled and optimized portion of it is the landing page, where when you go to access your QuickBooks, that page will always be there for you to get it to connect to your virtual desktop. They have their team of, there are hundreds of engineers that keep that site going and optimized. And also it's available from any part of the world. It's actually optimized for every part of the world. So if you go to this landing site or this landing page, it's going to be a local version, which is very good for the experience. And as we were saying earlier, with the virtual desktop environment, it comes with the ability to be accessed from many platforms: Apple, from Linux, HTML5 browsers, Android, and of course Windows, and enables you, as you can see here from my pictures, to essentially use QuickBooks anywhere that you have internet access. It's very convenient. Lastly, I wanted to present Windows 365. So Windows 365 takes the virtual desktop concept and makes it even simpler for you, the consumer. Essentially, Windows 365 manages every aspect of the virtual desktop environment, the technical side of it, and all you do as a customer is provision a license. So you're probably familiar with provisioning licenses, and there's one that's named for the virtual desktop. Once you provision that license, the end user can go to the website, and they are literally presented with a screen that says, "Welcome to your new desktop." And once they get to the screen, the menu options are very simple. As you can see here, you're presented with typical logging in type screens to make sure that you're authenticated correctly. And then it's like a physical machine. It literally it connects, and you are ready to go immediately. The Windows 365, as well as the Azure Virtual Desktop environments, start out with simple, as a simple concept, but at KAMIND we have experience with many other configurations that can range in complexity, and we can accommodate anything with a virtual desktop environment that to meet your needs as far as making sure your workforce is always productive and stays current with their data. So just to wrap up, Windows 365, it's cost-based. It's a very simple cost-based product from Microsoft. It's a flat rate per month, and as you can see here, you can choose from Windows 10 or Windows 11, and you are welcome to pick a virtual PC with as much horsepower as you like. The prices will adjust accordingly. But even if you do pick a kind of a machine with a lot of horsepower, the price is still fairly reasonable. So thank you for your time. I appreciate you letting me present these items to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Matt.
Hey, thanks, Wayne. And just give you an idea from the Windows 365 desktop pricing. The ranges are at the low end from their fixed price is $20 a month to $162 a month. And the way they actually structured it, it's an Azure consumption. So that's actually how it's billed against, and it's a fixed price. So when you actually look at Windows 365 desktop or Azure VVD, and by the way, you can actually mix things together because we've done that as well. You're really trying to figure out what gives you the best bang for the bucks in terms of what you're trying to do and what's the job function. A lot of our demos, for instance, that we actually use either the 4 gig and the 64 gigabyte storage with 128. Now, keep in mind, Windows is a service, so like you would have a higher end PC, for instance, that you have like 8 or 16 gigs of memory. A lot of the OS functionality is actually in Azure, so you really are just seeing the user interface portion, which is a small footprint. That's why you have the memory sizes the way it is. So you pick memory size more based on the business application. So with that, and thank you very much, Wayne. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk over some of the security changes and some of the features. Now at KAMIND, we're kind of a unique partner. I said we're a direct managing partner. And a lot of this may not be maybe some interest, but it's some of I want to bring to everyone aware that in the Microsoft ecosystem, the Microsoft world, you really have two different data center environments, what we call Azure Commercial and Azure Government. They're totally independent. Now at KAMIND, we can actually provide licensing into the GCC High and the GCC DoD environments that's restricted for US citizens. So we actually have that ability. And the reason why I brought this up, and for some of our clients that have in this webinar, is this little thing known as CMMC. Now what's happening is CMMC, there's two sides of it. Yeah, it's going for the Department of Defense and federal contractors, but we're seeing a trend throughout the state governments for any type of corporate entity or commercial entities such as us and yourself, is that you're going to have compliance requirements. And a lot of the compliance requirements you're seeing are going to be based around NIST 800 and 171. So when you look at what's happening in terms of the federal government, you look at what's happening in Arizona, in California with the changes CCPA 2.0, and also in terms of New York in terms of what they're having with their changes, you're going to see in 18 to 24 months, compliance is going to be mandatory for anyone doing business in the United States. So if you want to get insurance, if you want to get cyber insurance, you're going to have a compliance strategy. So I want to raise this up as you look through these things. You need to start looking at your environment and saying that, do I have the basics in there? And then when you look at the base of like CMC level 1, for instance, it's things like, do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have passwords on your printers? Do you change things from the default passwords? Things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that changes. Now, what Microsoft has also done is kind of to enhance things when you actually look at what's going down the compliance, and this will make sense as we look at some of the security features. They made a lot of changes in terms of how the biometric access done for like Windows Hello. So now you can actually use FIDO keys. For instance, on my keyring, for instance, I have another multi-factor authentication token. This is known as a FIDO key. And that's what I actually use to, in some cases, to log into my devices. So that's how things are taken. You're having multi-factor authentication. So this is more enhancements in 365. The other enhancement they change is with DLP, because all the new regulations that we're seeing in the state and the commercial sector is you have to control where, you have to control protected data, customer information, credit card information, banking information. Those things are now required. And so you have to have a strategy. So the big change we're seeing in 365 this year is the enhancement, the data loss protection that you see it. Now, one of the features that I hope you guys are all using, we use in our security products, is that we basically look at secure score. So we can actually measure against how we're actually achieving. Now, secure score is a metric, and how you want to use it, you want to measure against yourself. Where was I last week? Where was I last month? Where am I this week? So you can actually see yourself improvement. It's a continuous improvement process. And that's really important to basically look in terms of how to quantify the environment. Now in the 365, you're seeing a lot of their features in terms of like Office 365 endpoint, for instance, and in terms of how things are configured in terms of services and what the emphasis are. And I put this screen in here. This is about the Office 365 Microsoft Defender for Office, but it really emphasizes on protect, detect, investigate, and respond. Those four categories when you look at security. So what's happening in this, what Microsoft is introducing is a new version of Defender for Endpoint. So when you look at the capability, they had a version known as a P2 version, which was available for the enterprise subscription, which does all these things, threat vulnerability, attack surface reduction, in terms of generation, endpoint detection and response, and automated remediation. So you get all these type of capabilities, but what they've done now is created a P1 version. This is just recently released. Now what they have, for some of you that are using the Microsoft 365 E3 subscriptions, for instance, this is going to be part of the subscription now. So you're going to get this manual, what we call the manual version of Defender for Endpoint. It still does all those functionality feature. What it doesn't do, when it does the detection and everything else, then you have to basically, as a service provider, you have to as your IT staff, you have to go through and remediate it. Now, this is the same product that basically is in the higher end subscription, the 365 E5. And also, this is a kind of a sub-kit of what we actually have in our DoD subscription, which is basically Defender Endpoint P2s, which is on steroids. And you'll see those features coming through because there's much more stringent requirements that you're going to see being made available to the corporate community. How you actually get this is that basically it's a per license. And the cool thing about this is that, Defender for Endpoint, this is functionality that you can actually put on your smartphones. And one of the features they're doing with Defender for Endpoint is they're actually adding web filtering. So a lot of people, when they look at mobile devices, you want to do the necessary web filtering to control the pieces on it. Now you can actually do that. And we're going to have a data sheet they can get a hold of. And that's kind of the big security protection. On the AI thing, a lot of fundamental changes. And I think you've seen it with the new Office 365 apps. And when you look at Office 365, what most of us don't realize is that when Microsoft releases a new version of Office 365 in the cloud, that means they build the infrastructure. They really build everything. That means a core Office 365 core engine, all the apps and everything else. So you constantly, things are being updated. And if you look, if you're using like Office 2019, the volume license version, keep in mind, that is the volume license version that was what was released in November of 2019. Right now, we're running Office 365 in the cloud. And so the subscription version we're using is some 700 updates later than what that current version is. So it's really important to make sure you keep yourself updated and you can take advantage of all these new AI features that are being pushed out. because you're seeing a lot of things and trying to figure out how to actually improve productivity and how to make it really very just easier to make things happen. And you're seeing now the integration in terms of how it happens with natural language queries and how the typing and everything else, and also multilingual. And if you haven't tried the dictation, you have the dictation. So now you have the speech, improved speech to text stuff. And as we look in terms of the transcription in Teams, it really makes a pretty cool solution. Now you look at all those pieces and everything else, and you look at consistency. One of the issues that we have as, workers, we're all kind of office workers of some type. We're trying to make sure that the tools we use on our phones, the tools we use on our home PCs, our work environments, they're the same thing. So it's about simplicity. Because we're busy, we want to make sure that things get done. So a lot of the AI features that are being produced really gives you that capability. Now, the other change that we have, it's going to be price changes. And price changes, I mean, Microsoft hasn't raised price changes. We tried to list them all here, and we'll go through some of this, make sure you have you understand the pieces. But prices are going up. And you have to understand is that this is not one of these things that you stick your head in the sand, because basically when you make changes to subscriptions, we make other changes, then you're going to actually see the new pricing. So there's ways that we can work with you to kind of basically make sure that pricing is minimized, but it's really trying to figure out how to map you into a monthly subscription, annual, or a triannual subscription. Now there's different strategy associated. So what KAMIND is we have with our CSP clients, we actually have a free service, which we basically, if you have our CSP agreement with us, we actually work with you on a quarterly basis and help you move subscriptions around. So if you have like flexible workers on a monthly basis, then they'll be at a higher premium. And then what you can have is that, well, basically after maybe 3 months, you want to move some of those to an annual so you have a lower cost. And then you may have some of those you want to move them to a triannual. And so you look at different paces. You have to look at your license strategy as a strategy and have a planning associated with it. And so that's been the big changes. Now, as a side note, when I look at these changes, what this means to me is that you're seeing the ability of Microsoft having monthly subscriptions that can adjust pricing on a monthly basis. So we're going into inflationary times. So take this as a kind of, Microsoft is usually, I found in the past, are about 18 to 24 months ahead of the market. So they're prepping themselves to get ready to make inflationary changes to adjustment products as needed to basically cover costs. So as business owners and as corporate strategic members, it's really important to take a look at our businesses and say, okay, where do we need to put prices? Where do we need to basically make sure we get the right products? What type of mix we need to do? So it's really important message to come through, and don't overlook this. Now, what we did on the license, there's some caveats you have to worry about. I highlighted these in yellow so you can see them. Monthly, the key change on this is that you cannot decrease licenses until the end of the term. And the license term is described as 72 hours after it's billed for the full term. So when you add a license into a monthly subscription, there's a 72-hour window which you can make changes. After the 72-hour windows, those licenses aren't fixed. If you have and if you decide you want to reduce the licenses in a month, you're still going to pay for the entire month. Likewise, if you have a 1-year term, and let's say you have 100 E3s and you find that 2 months into it that you want to reduce to 80 E3s, you're still going to pay for the 100 E3s. So keep in mind, and the same in the triennial. So it's more you have to keep in mind of what the changes are and how you want to manage it. And we're here to help you to do that, because this is something where we want to partner with you to make sure that you get the, get the right mix. And to give you an idea of what the impact of this is, if you don't make changes, here's an example of an E3 with a price increase. It's going to $23 a month in terms of the new pricing effective on March 1st. If you actually that's on a 1-year subscription. If you're doing on a monthly subscription, the new price is going to be $28.75. So now you're looking and saying, okay, what is the price mix? What licenses do you have? How do you actually mix them? And you have to look at it from a standpoint of strategy. How many license, what percentage license do I have a core and a triennial mix? What percent of license I have on a yearly mix? And what percent of license do I have a variable on a monthly mix? And that's kind of really crucial to look, and we can work with you on that to kind of help drive something, help keep your prices in place. Wayne also mentioned in terms of the QuickBooks in the cloud, we're going to make this available. We actually, it's a long story we had. We actually built this for one of our clients to, we're managing our books, for instance, and we did it besides we wanted to do really one thing. We were having, our QuickBooks used to be hosted with a legacy RDP through terminal servers. Those are notorious of being hacked and ransomware. And we didn't want to deal with it. So the thing that we did is saying, okay, let's go build QuickBooks in an Azure virtual environment so that we can actually give a license to our bookkeeper, give a license to our CPA, and give a license to our auditors so they can look at our financials and do the necessary things, but do it in a secured model. And what we did with that, we've been using this process for over a year and refining it, and we're now going to make it available to our client at a low monthly subscription fee. And this is going to be a March allowance in March. And it really is an interesting model when you actually look at it. It's QuickBooks is one of the products that everybody hates, but as you look in business, we see it for all sizes business. We've seen it some, companies with 500 users using, 500 employees using QuickBooks as a basis. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but we all have a certain pain or a certain love or a certain hate for it. But, hey, it is what it is. Now, the other thing we're doing, we have a ton of webinars coming up. We're sending out cards. We're basically trying to, you'll be getting postcards in the mail as well. We have webinars that we're forecasting 3 months out. The ones we have, we're going to have a deep dive in Defender for Business. This is the new Defender for Endpoint P1 and P2, how it works. And also with your doing the CMMC, we're actually talking about how to do CMC self-assessment. And we have an announcement we're planning to announce in there to actually help companies to complete their CMC, their NIST 800-171 assessment. And it's interesting because we're having companies that do not have any requirements to do like a filing with the federal government and what we call SPUR scores, but they want to go through a NIST assessment because their vendors, their clients are demanding them to put a security standard in place. And it's no longer good enough to say, hey, I got MFA. You have to go through and say, I have MFA and I implemented against this security baseline NIST 800-171 certain controls. Because you have to basically be verifiable that you do things and basically defend it. So where to get more information, we're just wrapping up. We have some time for questions. If you want to get a demo of the QB in the cloud, let us know. We'll give you a demo on it. The key thing, the takeaway, we have to get you upgraded to the new NCE agreements. And basically, so we can lock in your current rates because there's a limited window which we can do that. So, just give Mike or Brendan or myself a call. And also, the important things, we're going to be offering a free gift. We have a raffle gift that we're going to give out. So go put the feedback. If you like the material, tell us that you like it. And also let us know what incremental things that we would like you to see, what additional stuff that you would like to actually see. And with that, I'm going to basically push it back to Mr. Mike.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Wayne. So I hope you guys enjoyed the ride and had your seatbelt on tight. We covered a lot of ground there. Just to recap, we talked about Microsoft licensing changes. The good news there was starting March 1st, everybody gets the free team audio conferencing piece. If you're a commercial account, that's $4 per user per month. So that's pretty sweet little free add-on. We talked about Power Automate, workflow automation. We talked about Azure Virtual Desktop. Think of it as kind of the new upgraded secure terminal server that works on, 4 different platforms. So it's very diversified. We talked about Windows 365, PC in the cloud, if you will. We talked about security and compliance. We talked about AI and assistance. And we also talked about the new upcoming NCE, that stands for New Customer Experience, CSP price updates. But the good news on that side was you can lock in your current pricing now for either 1 or a 3-year term. So you don't have to put up with that price increase. You can lock it in. But as Matt just mentioned, you need to do that right away because the runway is getting short on that. So I will open it up to questions. Feel free to unmute, ask, or you can put your questions in the chat window, whatever you're comfortable with.
Mike, this is Lauren. You said that the runway is getting short. When is the cutoff date for the licensing change to be able to lock in prices?
March 1st. We would, we'd like to see people take action prior to March 1st because the closer we get to that date, the more we're going to get hammered. And I mean, we only have so much capacity. And, so the sooner the better. But I'm more than happy to, work with you and answer your questions, make sure you understand your options and figure out the best fit. And it's not all, there's 3 options there. So you can mix it up. You could go 50% in one option, 25 in one, and 25 in the other. It's really what makes the best business sense for your organization.
Yeah, and I should add is that Microsoft is forcing us to convert customers from legacy CSP, that's what you have current now, to a monthly subscription. So, and there's ways that they're giving some price guarantees for a couple months on it to basically ease the pain, but there's a limited time window when you can take advantage of this, of basically getting the legacy prices.
That's a great question. Any more there, Lauren?
No, that's great. I definitely will be moving forward on making some changes on how we do licensing in reflection to what has just been shared. But our organization doesn't change the number of employees to a large degree, so I suspect we'll be largely going to the 3-year model.
I might add on the 3-year model, if you want to pay it all up front, it will net you a discount. So, if you got extra money in your bank account and feel like paying 3 years ahead, you will get a discount on that.
How significant of a discount?
It's approximately 5%.
Okay.
So we have one question in the window here. Do we have to do this on or before March 1st? Yes, absolutely.
And I should mention there's the charity and education. The pricing is going to be announced on like March 1st. Their conversion date's going to be, I think their conversion date's going to be June 1st, but that's kind of a little squishy in terms of the dates, but basically Microsoft is standardizing everything across the board. So the big change for folks is really to internalize, if you commit to a certain term, you can't decrease it, you have to add to it. So you have to plan for these things.
So follow up on that March 1st date. I guess I wasn't crystal clear. You have to do it before March 1st. March 1st is the absolute deadline on this.
But with what Matt was just saying, those of us that are nonprofits, we do have a little more time, it sounds like.
Yes, you have the not-for-profits have about another 2 to 3 months. So okay. We'll see what happens. This in some ways we're on a lot of Microsoft planning committees, so we've known about the price increase of the SKUs. The term subscriptions were basically, this was something that they made a decision around October, about middle of October. So it's like, and so there's a lot of changes going through how we do things and everything else. And it's just, I mean, the key thing for us we're trying to figure out is what do we need to put in place to basically help you kind of minimize the dollars you pay through the Microsoft, to the Microsoft folks.
So I might mention on the Azure Virtual Desktop, I'm seeing more and more clients that have laptops or tablets with telecommunication capability out in the field. They're using that vehicle to house their proprietary app up in the Azure cloud, and then they'll let their field people access that app to do like real-time quotes for the customer while they're on site. And then, they have their email on there, so they could just go ahead and email them, the customer, the quote right there when they're on site. That's getting to be pretty popular, actually. And as Matt mentioned, it is a very secure medium now. So I see a question from Brian here. Matt, I'll let you take that one.
The answer is yes. And because that's the way it works for ourselves, like when we do our books, we have like billing portals, we do stuff through our ticket system, and we integrate everything, plus we send out invoices through the environment. So yeah, I mean, this is the whole thing. It's just trying to basically put the environment in to get it easily controlled so it all integrates. I mean, we did it because we have requirements because of the license types that we sell into the defense industrial base. There's requirements that are placed on us. And this is one of the areas we had to clean up in terms of where we're hosting our books. And so, we started looking at it, and I'd much rather, because Windows Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 is a proxy service. That means that there's no exposed ports. So you basically have a higher level of protection, and there's less ability to things getting hacked.
All right, about 5 minutes left. Anybody else? Oh, we got a question from Justin here.
So looking at Justin has a question is that looking at E3 and F3, F3 is known as a frontline worker combo. And the size of the F3, he's concerned about the size of the F3 mailbox. Now, one of the things that were good, I use the term called crafting. When you have a 365 subscription, you can actually craft different features in there to have different functionality. So like we have like an F3 subscription, for instance, is that if you're like a SMB, you can take an SMB license like a SMB Basic, for instance, which has a 50 gig mailbox and a 1 terabyte OneDrive. And then you can actually link that with an F3 and basically use the licenses and swap them back and forth because they're both licensed and take advantage of things that way. What happens is you have to start looking at what the total cost is in the management. That's kind of the driving. So you can do different types of mixes of that. We also have people with like SMB licenses that suddenly have a mailbox that exceeds 50 gigs. And what we do is we'll add an exchange plan too, which is a 100 gig mailbox, and basically just deselect one license type for one license type the other, and mix it. The problem you have to worry about is going to come down more of long-term license cost. Are you at a monthly rate for that, which is the premium rate, or you do the yearly, and have to kind of look at the mathematics behind it and what's the ROI.
Great question, Justin. Anybody else?
Yeah, just to add, like in just in case, for instance, that would be like an F3, which I think F3 runs at the old price was like $8, and the business basic 365 business basic 5, so that's 13. So you have a $13 subscription compared to something else, and so you start looking at the numbers from that and see how you mix and match them. Just like you can take a business premium for license, for instance, and add additional high-end enterprise SKUs like Microsoft CAS, Cloud App Security, Defender Plan 2 license SKUs to it. So you take the older $20 price, and you can add some incremental license and turn it into like a baby 365 E3 for about 37 or 38. So you have to really run the numbers, and we can help you with that and try to figure out what makes sense. It just really comes down to a business decision. I just want to remind everyone, so it looks like we're pretty much almost out of time. We'll pass back to you, Mike. Don't forget to enter the feedback for our drawing.
Yeah, just got www.kamind.com/feedback. And again, we're giving away a prize, randomly select somebody. Anyways, again, this is our first webinar of the year. We appreciate you attending today. You will be seeing the mailers, postcards to get the next 3 months worth of webinar schedules. It's always posted on our website as well. But we appreciate your time today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next series of webinars. Thanks, and have a great day, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.